Well, let's take a look now at the markets in Africa, and we start in East Africa, where the NSC down again yesterday to stand at 4902.60, as you see over there, and 0.61% rather down on the month. And the shilling, as we were saying yesterday, has been pretty steady, and a slight move there, 0.12%, and 83.8 is where the shilling stands now today. So let's now talk about that Kenyan market, and we cross now to Muammar Ismaily, who is waiting for us in Nairobi. Morning, Muammar. We've talked earlier in the week about the Nairobi market being quite stable and steady after the political uncertainty of the election. And one of your colleagues on the show yesterday was saying that there's a different kind of uncertainty now, which is the government going to be able to implement all of its new constitutional structures? And it's made a lot of promises ahead of the new I think it's a 5-year term that they have now following the election.
Yeah, we saw that, and yesterday they actually unveiled the new structure for the government in terms of the number of ministries they're going to have. We've seen a new, more lean, more efficient government, and I think this is a positive sign to the markets, especially considering that there are very many levels of government with the devolution process. So it's a positive sign from yesterday's news, and we expect that to help the market stabilize going forward.
And what about the currency? It also seems to have been relatively stable. Often on the show we talk about how the central bank has had to intervene to correct other movements in the currency market.
Yes, well, it's partly influenced by the tea auctions. We've seen a lot of foreign activity there. I think the macroeconomic environment has stabilized, and we expect major gains against the dollar as well as the pound going through into next week.
Right, let's look at some of those shares there, and in particular the banking sector has been interesting, correcting downwards now. KCB, one of the movers there, 1.8%. Yes,
I think we've seen profit taking on KCB, equity, some of the overvalued counters in the banking sector. To note, KCB actually, the annual report came out this week, and they've posted a lot of profits in the regional subsidiaries, South Sudan especially, but we did see a loss in Rwanda of around 50 million shillings. It's disappointing considering that they recorded a profit the year before that. And it's also disappointing considering that all the other regional subsidiaries had posted a profit. But I think that's something for KCB to sort out. The corporate lending section in Rwanda is very small, and that's the niche that they've gone for. But it's just a matter of increasing their pipeline, and we should see results improve.
Certainly, there's a lot of activity, and some of those countries that are mentioned, South Sudan, Burundi, Tanzania, are described as star performers by the chairman of Kenya Commercial Bank, KCB. How stable are these kinds of growth rates, and how stable is the kind of exposure that banks from Kenya have? Because potentially this could be great growth for these banks.
Yes, coming back to South Sudan, the level of financial inclusion in that sector is very low. So we want to see more penetration coming in. A lot of banks have opened up shop in South Sudan. There's been a lot of infrastructural development, a lot of business activity. So there's a lot of room for growth there. And we see anyone who set up shop there should be able to post positive results. The same goes for countries like Uganda and Tanzania, with a huge pool of unbanked citizens.
Well, that certainly is encouraging for Kenya's banks, and that growth is certainly expected from that exposure. Looking at the insurance sector, several movements there, Kenya Re, Britam and Centum. What's happening in that sector?
Well, namely, Centum is expected to announce the results shortly. We expect that they'll come up with positive results. I think there's a bit of speculation on that particular stock. We've seen the stock move up in the last few days, and we expect it to continue doing that. I think the other factors in terms of insurance, there's increased insurance penetration. There were a lot of covers taken pre-election, to help prepare for the political situation, which we thought might have been a bit volatile. But now that there's been a peaceful transition, we believe that the insurance companies are sitting on a huge level of premiums.
And then we always, or almost always, talk about Safaricom. It's one of the big companies, and a lot of investors have an interest in it. The top mover yesterday, up 1.5 percentage points, and foreign investors again taking an interest there.
Yes, it's always an interesting counter for the foreign investors. It has good fundamentals. It's recently risen to a recent high of 6.55. There's a report that came out yesterday from the Communications Commission of Kenya indicating that they've increased their SMS share of the market to roughly more than 80%. They've also struck a new deal with restaurants, around 400 restaurants, whereby customers who go inside can pay for their meals at the restaurant. So a lot of innovation, in that sector, and we see the same in Access Kenya. So expect the interest in Safaricom to be maintained.
Yeah, and it's we've remarked before on the link up between, as banking changes, the synergies between a sector of banking and telecommunications means growth for both areas, really. Just looking at the macro level, Kenya has had good economic growth. The IMF, International Monetary Fund, wanting a financial services tax to protect the economic gains last year. Why are they wanting that?
I think, over the course of 2012, there was a lot of growth that came through. The government invested heavily in infrastructure, and we saw benefits of that trickle down to the banks. I think they just want to maintain whatever measures were put in place, and therefore make sure that the government continues to generate growth. I think a financial tax could help, but it remains to see whether the the financial sector will take it positively. We already know that the government is in a sort of fragile state, unrolling the new Jubilee manifesto from the new government. The banks want to maintain their profitability. So the question remains, will they accept this financial gains tax? But I think we should just wait and see over the next 1 or 2 months, see what happens.